Hey guys, welcome to the Depth of Field podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Thompson, and today on the show we have Andrew Studer, a professional photographer who captured the most amazing photographs of the 2017 solar eclipse. We're going to talk about what it took to get those shots, what led up to it, the planning, logistics, and all that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it, but don't forget your solar glasses, and please make sure they're certified. All right? Andrew, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Adrian.
Obviously, I saw your shots of the eclipse really caught my attention, being a Redmond local, and they've been getting a lot of engagement on Facebook. So I'm curious if this week has been any different for you with all this attention, or is it just business as usual?
Well, yeah, definitely. This is pretty out of the ordinary. I think that the photos that me and some of my friends who were with me captured were fairly unique. And I think a lot of people are pretty excited about that, and that's just something that we didn't expect, and we're just really appreciative of all the shares and attention that our photos have gotten. So we're really excited about it.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to talk more about those specifically, but first, could you give us just a quick background on how you got started in photography and then the journey that led you to where you are now?
Definitely. So I guess I was always pretty artistic growing up. I used to really like to draw and, do all sorts of art and create things. And I grew up in Oregon, and it's really, really beautiful here. There's a lot of incredible landscapes. And so I think that photography was just a natural continuation of, my passion for art and the outdoors. And so I got into outdoor photography I think around 2012, and just started creating and fell in love with it ever since.
Yeah, one thing I was impressed to learn was that you're only 22, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So what age were you when you started?
Probably around 16 or so.
Okay. And you're working with brands already like National Geographic, Columbia, and GMC. So I'm curious, what's your secret? How have you become so established already at such a young age?
Well, to be honest, I don't know. It's probably a bit of luck, but I just try and post my personal work just as much as I can. And, sometimes brands happen to see that, or the agencies that they work with, and they just want me to do something similar for them or whatever. So I'm definitely pretty fortunate to be working with so many companies, and especially just be doing this full time and making a living out of it. I'm pretty thankful for that.
How did it start out? What were your first type of clients like, and then how did it transition into the bigger stuff? Was there a clear point that happened, or how could you describe that transition?
Well, it definitely wasn't a clear point, but I learned a lot just as an intern with a studio called Buck Studios in Portland. Okay. And I would just be involved with their shoots, whether it was assisting or just as a second camera op. But I got a lot of experience with them and learned a lot from them, and it kind of transitioned from there. So it was a great experience for sure.
Cool. Okay. And did the context from that help you as you moved into more of a freelance role?
Yeah.
Or did you have to find these clients or did these clients approach you, or were you able to reach out and get that on your own?
Yeah, well, Darren Utt with the producer at Buck Studios was certainly a big player in helping me transition. But like I said earlier, just posting my work and just hoping that the right people would see it online. That was pretty key, and cool. It helped me transition that way. So.
Cool. All right. Well, let's talk about some of these eclipse shots. Can you tell us about the pre-production that went into making that all happen?
Definitely. So it was certainly a team effort. I worked closely with my friends Ted Hesser, Martina Tibel, and Tommy Smith in the pre-production for this. And Ted and I, he's another photographer who was there who captured a very similar shot. We both had very similar ideas for an eclipse photo, so we collaborated on it, and Ted got coordinated with Tommy and his girlfriend Martina to climb up and get in position for the eclipse. And he also helped find the general location for where we would want to be. But we scouted and we worked with Tommy the climber, and I helped position him exactly where he would need to be for the photo, and got him in a good spot compositionally as far as like head position goes, body
Yeah.
position, and stuff like that. And um, so it was definitely a team effort. We used an app called the Photo Pills to try to figure out where the sun was going to be, but
Ah,
thankfully
okay.
um, Ted was able to scout and figure out like where the sun would be, and just to confirm that the app was working, because sometimes they get a little janky. But,
Yeah.
um,
That was my next question because that seems like some rocket science type of math you'd have to do otherwise to figure out where exactly it would be
yeah,
at that time.
yeah, the app's pretty simple to use, so it
Cool.
was nice.
So how many times were you out there? Did you just go to Smith Rock once before to plan this out, or were you there several times?
Well, I've been there several times before.
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty familiar with the area, and really, we could have had a climber anywhere, but
Yeah.
on any of the ledges and everything out there, because the foreground is so high, and if you get close to it,
Mm-hmm.
the sun was so high. But um, like I said earlier, Ted kind of figured out the general area where we would want to be. And we chose Monkey Face because it's such a symbolic and iconic rock structure at Smith Rock State Park.
Well, not that I'm really going to understand, but I'm sure some listeners are really curious to know what equipment did you end up using and why?
Yeah, so I just want to, before I get into that, I just want to make a note that anybody could have taken these shots and used any camera or lens as long as it was a telephoto lens.
Sure.
So my answer, varies from, what you should be using or anything like that. But to answer your question, though, I used a Canon 1DX2 and used a Sigma 150 to 600 sport lens. And to support it, I used an Enduro 204 tripod. They're super lightweight and high quality, and I used one of their gimbal heads. And that was pretty key for me getting the photo, because I was able to recompose really quickly. Because the telephoto lens, the Sigma, is so heavy, and so having a gimbal head was super
Mm-hmm.
helpful to uh, reposition and lock down a tripod shot. So.
Okay, cool. What about some of the technical settings in terms of shutter speed and exposure? Do you remember, and would you even be willing to share that type of stuff, or is that like trade secret?
No, not at all. I'm
Okay.
happy to share it. It was kind of interesting, though. We didn't know exactly how dark it was going to be
Yeah.
in totality. We didn't know how the light was going to affect the foreground and our climber.
Right.
And so it kind of, we were adjusting almost while it was happening. And we only had a
Okay.
minute 28, but I set my ISO fairly high because it was kind of dark, but then the bright lights from the ring light around the sun was fairly bright. So I wanted to have a fast shutter speed because it was on a telephoto lens, but I wanted also exposed for the brightness. And I brought up the shadows and the dark areas in post.
Okay. So yeah, that's where your experience is coming in. I assume with having to make these last minute adjustments, and you only have a minute and 30 seconds. So that's got to be a little. That's got to feel a little tense in those moments.
It was very tense. The whole shooting experience happened so fast, but it was pretty surreal.
Could you describe just what it was like, or just elaborate on it, what it was like during that 1 minute 30? Like, have you seen a total eclipse before? And or, so, if not, like, what was that like on top of doing this whole shoot?
Oh man, I've never seen a total eclipse before. It was so surreal. Like I said, I didn't know exactly what to expect, and
Yeah.
um, it was insane. One of the most memorable things I think about seeing the eclipse at Smith Rock was the cheers and howls that everybody
Mm,
was doing during totality, and
yeah.
it would all echo around the valley, and it was so surreal. And
Yeah.
it got cold because the sun completely went away, and I remember just getting so many goosebumps, and
Yeah. Me
it
too.
was it was so surreal in the moment because we didn't know if the shot was going to work out. If our math was off or our planning was off just a little bit,
Yeah.
um, we would have completely missed it. And I think the fact that we realized while it happened that it worked out perfectly and the climber was in the perfect position and we got the shots that we envisioned, just made it all that more surreal. I remember there's actually a video of me, my reaction, I guess, right after shooting it. Columbia Sportswear was working with us and got
Okay.
a documentary of it, but
Nice.
I sort of just stepped away from the camera and just took off my hat and was just shaking my head. I was just like, "There's no way." Like I was just completely blown away that everything worked out and what it was like, and it was so surreal.
So did you know you had the shot that, or were you not so confident in the moment, or did you know like, okay, yeah, we got it?
This was one of those rare moments where I was just like, "Yep, I got it. I'm just gonna
Nice.
step away from the camera. I don't need to check. I'm just I need to just go for a quick walk and just decompress." It was a
That's awesome.
it was a pretty emotional moment, to be honest. I'm not usually, prone to like, I guess experiencing these sort of spiritual or like emotional sort of things.
Sure.
It was a pretty just moving moment for sure.
And that is saying a lot because you've traveled around so much. Like, could you give us an idea of some of these other exotic places you've been to taking pictures?
Definitely. Well, I've done a decent amount of traveling to some pretty beautiful areas. I've done a couple trips to Iceland, some out to Italy and Switzerland, and spent a bunch of time in the Canadian Rockies. And
That's awesome.
I've seen quite a few things that are just really beautiful, and I'm super fortunate to have witnessed them, like uh, volcanoes and the Northern Lights. But to be honest, totality was probably one of the most just insane things I've ever seen.
Wow. Okay. Was there was it pretty crowded on Smith Rock? Were you getting competition from other photographers? I know you had, like you said, your friend Michael was there also taking pictures. What was it like in terms of other people?
Well, there were a couple other people with us. It definitely wasn't competition in any way. Another photographer, Chris Burkhardt, was across the river, just maybe 100 feet away from us with his team, and they were working with a slackliner
Uh huh.
below our climber. And there were a lot of other people with similar ideas, but what I thought was pretty cool was how everybody walked away with completely different shots.
Yeah.
So my friend Michael and Ted, they were only a couple feet away from me, but they walked away with completely different shots just because of how far away the climber was and what compression did to the photos. The climber was in a completely different spot in their photos, and
Right.
I thought it was pretty neat how we just got different photos.
Can we talk a bit about your experiences freelancing and what it's been like just managing the business relationships and how that's played into, obviously you have such an artistic role and you're not sitting behind a desk that much. So I'd just be curious to hear your take on just the pros and cons of being freelance.
Yeah, so I honestly love being a freelance photographer. I honestly couldn't be happier. But I definitely do spend a lot of time sitting at a desk and
Okay.
working. I feel so fortunate to be doing this full time, but there's so many days that go by where I'm just sitting at a desk on the computer from as soon as I wake up, to late at night, and I'm just editing or working on
Mm,
contracts or budgets and
okay.
and stuff like that. So I think that freelance photography, it's super fun, but people overlook sometimes the boring work that might go into it.
Sure.
But like I said, I'm super fortunate to be doing this full time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because obviously you're not posting pictures of you writing contracts on your Facebook page. You have all your amazing photographs. So that's what I was picturing your lifestyle like, oh, this guy's always traveling. But and so in reality, how many trips are you going on a year to these places?
I probably do a fairly decent trip once a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the next spot on your radar? Is that already planned? Are you taking a break?
Yeah, breaks are fantastic. When I get back from trips, I like to spend at least a couple days not leaving the house, just spending time with friends and watching Netflix in bed. I love those
Nice.
moments, to be honest. But, I think in 2 days I'm off to the Italian Alps to shoot a film
Wow,
there, and pretty excited for that.
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it should be really fun.
Awesome. Before we go, I like to end each episode with some practical advice for the listeners. So, what should an aspiring photographer focus on this week to get better at the craft?
I think that editing raw files is such a huge and important step in the whole photographical process. Um, I think that taking the time to learn how to, create a mood or follow through with a vision when it comes to editing with a raw file is super important. And so I think that, if you're trying to get more into photography, just start learning more about how light can impact a mood, and just think about how processing can really impact an overall image. So, to be honest, 9 times out of 10, my RAWs do not look as great as they do when I post them, and that's because I spend a lot of time processing them and working with the color and the light. It's not necessarily faking it. I think that editing photos is a really big step in the process, but I think that's something that a lot of people might overlook, and they expect to get beautiful results in camera. And while that definitely can happen, um, editing plays a huge role.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, I mean, what you're doing is taking advantage of the technology, right? Because it makes more sense to shoot a more flat image that you can edit later rather than the extreme trying to capture it perfect the first time where you have less room to make edits later.
Definitely, and I think that's the entire purpose of a raw file.
Totally. Well, if people want to see more of your work, where would you like them to go first? You prefer your Facebook page or your website? I'll link to both, but where would you send them to?
Yeah, Adrian. I think that my website is probably a good place to go. You can check me out on Instagram, but if you search my name, Andrew Studer, Andrew Studer, it should pop up, and you can check it out from there.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll put the link in the show notes, and I'd be remiss to mention that all these prints are for sale. People can buy them from your site. So if they want to support you, they can go ahead and do that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and, sharing your time with me. It was awesome to have you.
Hey, thanks so much, man. Stoked to be here.
Well, as always, this show is sponsored by Plot, the fastest way to create and share storyboards. If you're working on any type of video projects, I'm sure it'll save you time. So create your free account today at theplot.io. And if you haven't seen these solar eclipse pictures yet, we're going to post them in the show notes at theplot.io/010. There'll also be a transcript of the interview and some other links to Andrew's pages. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a blessed day. Again, I'm your host, Adrian Thompson, and I'll catch you next time.